Dedicated to geeks and nerds, you're listening to Project I Radio, 24/7 Nerdgasm.
Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
This is Bizzong, the bizarre and weird fiction podcast with me, your host, Mr. Frank. Back again, Zongers. We keep going. Strong like the Energizer Bunny in a sex toy that doesn't use a lot of power. This week, I'm going to bring you a different kind of guest. I told you we were going to mix it up. You know, we got the straight to bizarre guys. This time we're going to lean towards the more weird fiction variety. And I really have to qualify this guy because he's not traditionally known as a weird fiction guy. He's more of a horror zombie kind of guy. At least that's where you might recognize his name from. And he's expanding even beyond that. He's trying to go a little more like the thriller route and suspense and that type of thing. But we've got him on Bizzong today because what I like about our next guest is that he's got some marketing strategies that I don't think are normally seen in the bizarro and weird fiction realms. And I want to tap him for that information. And now, we may not see these techniques normally just because of the atmosphere of the genre. Often we kind of preach to our own choir. But I think some of these things are interesting and could be integrated. And I just want to expose new ideas in marketing, bizarro and weird fiction, to the masses. Whoever's willing to listen. So who we have this week is one Mr. Armand Rosamilia. Like I said, he's typically known as a zombie writer, a horror writer, but he has recently won a contract with Amazon and their Scout program, and he's trying his hand at more suspense and crime stuff. And he's also expanding into contemporary fiction and paranormal thrillers. He's really kind of all over the board and very open with his writing. But tonight we're going to concentrate on the weird side of him. He has delved into the weird fiction market a little bit. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on to Bizzong now, for you fine Zongers, Mr. Armand Rosamilia. So, welcome to Bizzong, the one and only Mr. Armand Rosamilia. Welcome to the show.
What's up, Frank?
How's it going?
It's going. It's going.
It's good. It's good to hear that it's going. It's always positive. Now I got to kind of qualify you a bit to be on this show, but I think you have a place here because this is the bizarre and weird fiction podcast. I think I have a tether. Now, of course, the start of it would be you're involved in a trilogy called the Hellmouth Trilogy.
Right.
And I guess the story is you went into that, you and your collaborators went into that thinking you were writing Bizarro, and yours truly here had to point out, well, not really Bizarro. But, you know, it's weird.
Yeah, well, none of us really have read that much Bizarro, you know. And when we went in, we were all excited, we're going to do all these weird things, we're going to have crazy, you know, demons coming out of toilet bowls and all kinds of stupid shit like that. And one of us, I don't know who, said, we're doing like Bizarro. So I was like, all right, well, I'll have Frank read it because he's into that shit. And then he'll love it, and he'll be like, this is probably the greatest thing ever. And then you read it, and you went, I like it, but what the fuck? It's not Bizarro. And then I was like, yeah, guys, let's stop talking. Let's stop talking about that. But, yeah, Jack Wallen came up with it. The first one was Hollywood Hellmouth. And it was me, Jack, Jay Wilburn, and Brent Abel. And we basically each wrote a chapter without talking about plot or anything at all. Jack wrote the first chapter, and then we all just went in order, and we ended up writing a trilogy on it, about 30,000 words on each. And basically my thing was to try to mess with everything that came, the last three chapters. So like Jack would have this great character or whatever, and then I would try to kill the character or put him in a real bad spot and see if anybody could get through it and stuff. But It was a lot of fun, and it was, we did Hollywood Hellmouth, then we did Hoboken Hellmouth, and then we did Honolulu Hellmouth, and that was the trilogy, and basically the premise is a dude does like really bad, cheesy horror movies, and he wants to do this movie about them summoning a demon, so he buys this book, and it ends up really summoning a demon, and basically starts killing people in Hollywood and stuff. That was the basic idea behind it.
Yeah, and like you sort of said, it sounded like from all the stories coming out of that, it sounded like more of an experience of one-upmanship. Like you said, you hadn't really had a very vague premise, and you just started writing and developed the story as each person did their part, and it sort of turned into a one-upsmanship. Is that what you think led to the weirdness of what that story became?
Yeah, I mean, it was, for me, it was very freeing because you could just write a lot of absurd stuff that maybe didn't make 100% sense in the fact that it's not grounded in reality. So we would do a lot. I mean, there's a ton of inside jokes in there. So if you read the books and you know us, like we make fun of each other like crazy, and then there's other people in there that we're also making fun of, other writers, and then once we get into the last one, Honolulu, it takes place at a horror convention, and we really make fun of a lot of the horror convention cliches and all the people that you always end up meeting at all of those and stuff. So a lot of in-jokes and just fun, making each other laugh. Jacko writes at night while he's sitting in bed with his laptop while his wife's trying to sleep. And she was getting pissed because he was reading our stuff and laughing, and he kept waking her up. So she was like, "Go in the other room. You can't do this anymore," which I think was funny.
It's a lot of fun to read, that's for sure. And I don't think the inside jokiness of it necessarily takes away from the experience. It's almost like, in a way, you have to think of it as if you've ever watched the Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. It's a movie that's basically Kevin Smith has said it's just an inside joke movie, but
right.
You don't have to know a lot to still just enjoy the wackiness of it.
Yeah, you can still enjoy, like, that's a great movie. You can enjoy just as a viewer, and then you could also enjoy, you and I grew up in that area, and I grew up in the same group of people with Kevin and stuff, so a lot of that in-joke is like, I remember from us being in high school and stuff. A lot of the sayings and a lot of the goofy stuff I remember from way back when, which is cool.
That's definitely true, and that sort of leads us down the path where you are now with your weird and wacky fiction, and that is something you and I collaborated on that just came out last week. It's called Shocker.
It is. Here's the funny part with it. So I did the Hellmouth stuff, and I had done some weird stuff. Like I had done. There was a short story that I had done for like a cannibalism anthology about 5 years ago or so, and I wrote a story called Zombie Christ, and really crazy, over the top. And I was like, good, I finally wrote something like this, and I'm done. And then when I did Hellmouth, it wasn't as over the top crazy, but it was still kind of crazy, especially for what I normally write. And but I really liked it. So when you and I started talking about it, it was one of those, I know I can do this now, and I'm comfortable doing it. And I think that really, for me, that really helped, because this is tame by comparison of what you normally write, but crazy risque for what I normally write. So I think we met in the middle on our styles, which was good.
Yeah, I definitely had that feeling of that we were on sort of extreme ends of a spectrum, but I think it works happily in the middle ground. And sometimes I could feel as we're writing, like you're pulling it kind of one way, and I'm trying to bring it into the more screwy stuff. And then, about third of the way into the book, you can feel like it settles into this comfort zone of where we found the story, and it rolls really well from there, I think.
Yeah, I think the second one, for me, it was a lot easier to write, just because I knew your mindset in the story of, not necessarily the plot in the story, but I knew where you wanted to go with it, and I knew where I wanted to go with it, and we got into that groove, which made it a lot easier. I know in the beginning we were like, well, let's, I would write something, you'd be like, no, that's just, you're making him like a pussy in this or something, and we talked out a few chapters and changed a few things, so we were both more in line with understanding the main character, and I think that really helped, because in the second book we knew Vito, and it was real easy to write him for both of us.
Yeah, I agree with you, but here, I guess we should introduce what the Shocker is to the masses before we kind of pick at it a little bit. So you want to just talk about the Shocker, who the Shocker is, and what the story's sort of about?
I can't remember exactly how we came up with the idea. I think it was more or less me and you joking around about it. We're both Steel Panther fans. We've both probably used the Shocker in our lives, and so it's Vito, Shocker, Schicchetti, and we both grew up in Jersey. We both went to a lot of the same concerts and a lot of the same places. I mean, we grew up a half an hour away from each other about.
Yeah, that's about right.
So it was we knew a lot of the same places and everything else, and a lot of the in jokes and a lot of that Jersey stuff. So it was really, once we really put it together, once we started, it was a lot of our lives in it, some of the stupid stuff and all that we put into this story. But you really introduced the more of like the paranormal and the weird stuff to it. Whereas my original idea in my head was just this dude who's in prison for life, and basically he's done horrible bad things to people in the 80s, in the metal scene, going to Club N.A., going to all these different places, going down to Stone Pony and Asbury Park, whatever, and just kind of telling little stories about that. And then we got into the more of the absurd stuff like that. And then, of course, once you add Baby Jesus to any story, it always gets a little bit weirder.
Yeah, you're pretty spot on. I recall you, like you said, you just kind of came to me with the idea we're going to do this story about this guy who's just telling stories from prison and, about what he did in the 80s, because that's where we came from. And you started out, you wrote the opening chapter. I kind of had an idea that didn't fit necessarily what you wrote, but I kind of worked in a little bit into the opening, like his backstory.
Right.
And then we took off from there. And you were telling the story, about he met this chick and all this shit. And it opens up, not to be too spoiler, it happens right away. It opens up, he's telling the story about a chick he met in a parking lot of a club, and he just winds up strangling her to death or some shit. And I read the chapter, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty brutal and shit and crazy and off the wall, but it also seemed like, why the fuck did he even do that? It was kind of unexplained, and I'm like, well,
whereas my writing comes from more of a reality base, so it was a really like just a dark scene, like he's banging this chick and then he ends up killing her.
Yeah,
and then you really introduced the why he's killing people and stuff, and then it was like, okay, cool, now we're good.
Right? Yeah, Yeah, I sort of took that. I sat there and I'm like, why did he just brain this chick in the parking lot of a club? And I came up with that. I guess that's where my mind goes to, is like, well, he's not really murdering them. He's actually, an anti-hero. He's actually, it looks like he's murdering, but he's not, type of thing. And like you said, I springboarded it into a more parallel sort of a direction. But then I forgot where it came up with. I know you introduced it. I don't know why. But like you said, the Baby Jesus is one of the main characters, not only in the story, but in the entire trilogy that will play out. And I remember you saying...
that is an old joke for me, though. I mean, going way back to when I was like in junior high or whatever, I would always say, it was always what would Baby Jesus do?
Yeah.
That was always the joke, for me, it was always, because everybody would talk about, when you talk about Jesus, and not to be, I'm not anti-religious or anything, but, I just find the humor in everything. And even as a kid, it used to drive my mother crazy when I used to talk about baby Jesus, and she'd be like, "Stop saying that," because she knew it was me joking around. So it was always something in the back of my mind, and I might have had the idea when we were doing the Hellmouth books, but I didn't really use it because I thought I could use that somewhere else, somewhere down the line, you know?
Yeah.
And then this just was perfect.
Yeah, I think you just or we collectively wanted to add a sort of weird element to it, and it just seemed like your go-to weird element thing was, well, there'll be a baby Jesus then. That'll be weird. And it was weird, and like you said, it's not a religious thing having him in there, and I think we were careful to make him not a religious thing, and just had fun with him while not disgracing the baby Jesus either. I think we're as respectful as we can be.
Yeah, well, you say that, but then
I know.
When we first started writing together, and I remember I was doing a chapter, and my wife was in the room, and she was standing behind. We were talking, and she looks over my shoulders, and she sees the computer, and it's basically, I was just writing the part where baby Jesus comes out of a toilet bowl. And she was like, "Are you writing something with baby Jesus and it coming out of it?" And I said, "Oh yeah, me and Frank." And she goes, "Oh, Frank, okay." She goes, "I will never read that." And I said, "I don't want you to read this because I don't want to ever think, oh my God, if she reads this, she'll kill me." You know.
But it's the context. He's in a prison cell. The baby Jesus has got to get in somehow.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, he's got to come up through a toilet bowl. He's small. He can come up that way. It's not disrespectful.
Not at all.
Okay. But yeah, that's what you're going to get with the Shocker. And, like I said, it just came out last week. And I think we've had some fairly positive response to what is essentially a rather silly story.
Yeah. And again, if you read my other stuff, it is close to the Hellmouth stuff, but I think it's a little more. Well, you know what? It's slightly more absurd, but it's a lot more personal because of the Jersey connection and the places and everything else. And it's funny because we start Vito. When he's in that scene, the same scene you and I grew up with, late 80s, early 90s, all that. And now it's, today, how would he react if he was out of prison? You know what I mean? He's still in the mindset of Cassettes and Wasp and all these different bands that aren't really huge to the normal person anymore. So it was kind of fun for me to look at all that stuff and to look back at some of the cool bands and stuff that we grew up on too.
Yeah, and we play with that idea big time in the second one.
Yeah,
sort of Shocker at a time. But you know what I've been impressed with so far, and what I was sort of worried about was because it's very specific. At least how we were writing is very specific. New Jersey in the '80s in the hair metal scene, and I was kind of like. Not that we expected any giant audience or, to come to this book, but like I was a little worried we were being a little too specific about it, and that's all we're going to get. But everything I've seen so far, the reaction is not that you don't have to necessarily be from Jersey. You don't necessarily have to have lived through the 80s. I've seen a lot of people, they find it cool to go, oh man, that's what my dad went through. I'm like, oh, and that's what my husband was. Oh, this brings back great memories for me. It's striking a chord with everybody in a nice way, and it does. Yeah,
somebody had said that. Somebody had said, oh my God, my boyfriend grew up in New York, in the New York area, with the mullet and all that, and I'm sure this is exactly how he was growing up, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, so I like that it is striking a little bit wider chord with people than I anticipated it might.
Well, what's funny too is when I did the Hellmouth stuff, I thought, okay, that's it for me. I'm not going to do any of these kind of books anymore. And then we started, playing around with this. And in the meantime, we kind of did these when I wasn't writing my normal stuff. So it was, you would finish a chapter and it might take me 3-4 days because I had deadlines or whatever, and I would get back to it. knock out a chapter and go, here, Frank, and then you would take a few days. So it took us a long time with the first one to get into the groove and to write it. And I was doing so many other projects. And then this came out, and it was like, because I know we could have had it out a few weeks earlier, but then that would have stepped on my Dirty Deeds crime thriller, which is a completely different thing from this. I mean, it's like night and day. And so it was kind of funny, and again, me and the wife talked about it, and she was like, you're trying to get a broader, wider audience, but then you and Frank write this very specific book. And I said, but I wrote it, but I had a lot of fun doing it. You know, this isn't going to be the $1 million book that I'm going to write someday. But I had a hell of a time writing it with Frank, and I can't wait to put the next two out. So, the expectations were not high at all that we were even going to sell any copies. And actually, so far, we're doing a lot better than I thought we were going to.
Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with the purchases that have been made so far.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting you bring that up. Like I had sort of introed you as being a guy who's, you know, you're typically known as a zombie / horror guy. You touched on a little bit of weirdness, like you said, with the Hellmouth, and now come the Shocker. But you've been expanding your horizons. I know for a few years now you've been doing a contemporary fiction series, like beach read type of stuff.
Right.
And you've just recently put out some suspense thrillers, and like you just mentioned, you have a Amazon Scout contract, which is huge. With a Dirty Deeds it's a thriller. It's a, well, I mean, how do you categorize that as like a crime thriller?
Crime thriller. It's Kindle Scout. You know, now I have the Amazon marketing behind me, which is awesome. And it's been out not even a month, and my sales for everything are through the roof. And what's awesome about it is when they came to me and they said, okay, we're going to do the marketing, and we're going to market this to Janet Ivanovich fans and Carl Hyson fans. And I was like, holy crap, like two giant names. But I guess that was kind of how I wrote it without thinking of the audience like that. I want to get away from just the horror and the zombie stuff, and I wanted to write a book that had mass appeal. So I purposely, and the original version of Dirty Deeds, like the first 3-4 chapters I wrote, was really brutal. And it was more of a horror book, crime thriller horror book. And then I said, no, I want mass appeal on this one. I want to see if I can write a book without using profanity, without sex, without a ton of violence, all that. I want to make it have a lot more humor and fun to the book, and still use a really dark subject where the guy basically he's main character is being hired to kill children. He's a hitman, and he goes in and kills children. But in reality, he doesn't. He saves the children from whoever hired them and makes it look like that child is killed, and then he basically gets a kid adopted or whatever. And that was the main premise. But the original idea was this dude goes out and kills children, and how like a serial killer type of crazy.
Like Captain Howdy.
and you know what Dee Snider says, stay away from Captain Howdy.
Indeed. Now, that brings me to the second part of my question is, now that you are on the path and you have the backing of Amazon to reach this wider audience and have a more, popular type of book, were you worried putting out the book Shocker? After that, you were
very much so.
Were you?
Honestly, yeah, very much so. If we had not started this book yet, and if Dirty Deeds came out and you came to me this month and said, "Hey, let's write this book," I would have said no. To be honest with you, because I don't think I don't think it's going to have. Obviously, we wrote it knowing it wasn't going to have a mass appeal,
right?
For our stuff, and I'm trying to get away from the horror. I think I've hit a ceiling with my horror fiction, and with my I'm going to do Dying Days. I'm going to continue to do my zombie stuff, but I do have an ending in mind, and that there is X number of books that I know is going to come out, and I already have that in my head, and that will probably be it for me for zombie stuff. And my horror books have really been reworked more or less as like supernatural thrillers or stuff like that. I just wrote I co-wrote, at the same time you and I were writing Shocker, I co-wrote a ghost haunted house novel with Jay Wilburn. And we're marketing it not as a horror book necessarily, but as a haunted house book or a ghost story. And Devil Dog Press is putting that one out for us in about a month from now. And again, it was not. I don't want it to be thrown in with the horror books, because I don't think it is really a horror story, and I think you have a limited audience. You have a big audience, but I was going for much bigger. And with Dirty D's, I've proven that there's a much wider appeal if I throw it out there as a thriller. If I write thrillers, I probably sold more in this last month on that book than I have probably in the last 6 months on everything else. And I make a living doing this, you know. Some guys will say that and go, oh, well, so you sold 20 books this month instead of 2. I sold a lot of books.
Yeah. That's an important thing to discern here when you're talking about how you're, what you're writing. This is your full time. This is how you make money. You do no other thing other than write. So, I mean, do you get called to sell out for kind of stepping away from horror and stuff like that? I don't know if it's selling out as much as it's expanding, because I'm still doing the other stuff. We'll have, Shocker came out. We'll have Shocker 2 and Shocker 3 come out. I'll have Dying Days 6 and 7 come out this year. I'm writing follow-ups to the, Green River Blend, which is, the original concept again was a horror book, and it's more like, supernatural thriller. I'll have 2 sequels to that come out this year. Next year I'll do the 2 sequels to Chelsea Avenue, which started out as a horror book, and there's a lot of supernatural thriller elements in that as well. It's the marketing as well. When I put out Chelsea Avenue originally, the original company that put it out, they put it out as a horror book, and it sold horribly. And Devil Dog Press released it in September, and that was one of the things we talked about, was the marketing of it. And she said, well, it's not really just a straight horror book. It's more like a Bentley Little, Dean Koontz, those types of, thrillers. So let's market it like that and see what happens. And it's done really well. So are you finding that it's really just what label you slap on it?
Yeah, I'm finding that a lot of the stuff that I've written, Chelsea Avenue, Green River Blend are 2 great examples. Just by marketing them as paranormal thrillers or whatever, is definitely helping me to get more readers, who in turn will turn around and might try Dying Days or one of my straight horror releases, because it's not that far of a stretch away. I was very worried when I started doing the Flagler Beach fiction series, because it's, like you said, it's beach reads, that people were going to go, what is this shit? And I read his zombie stuff, and I have gotten some of that. I just did one set in Belford, set in Jersey, called Belford Stories, that will be out in April. And I had a couple of beta readers who have read the Flagler Beach stuff. And one beta reader, I had said to her, oh, did you read? She goes, no, I'm reading it now. So I let her beta read Belford, and basically she came back and she said, I didn't like Flagler Beach. I thought it was boring. I like your zombie stuff. I like your over the top. I like all the cursing and the violence and all this other stuff. So she thought that the Belford Stories was kind of boring for her, because she's not used to that. So you're never going to please everybody with what you put out. But the other 5 or 6 people that read it all said there's some great characters in this. There's some great little stories in this. But it is different from anything else. I mean, you're not going to pick up Belford Stories, and maybe if you love that, maybe you don't love Shocker, and maybe you don't in turn love Dying Days. But I'm fine with that. It's several different audiences I'm going for.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sort of begs the question of, typically when a writer switches gears that hard, typically you find the nom de plume, the pen name come up, for the different genres, the radically different genres, but you've decided just to keep publishing under your name, Armand Rosamilia. Was that a conscious decision? Did you have to like come to that decision? Just I'm going to keep my name. Did you wrestle with changing your name when you?
I wrestled with it, especially when I started with. The problem was, I think if I had started with Flagler Beach, the beach read stuff, contemporary fiction, then I probably would have written Dying Days under a pen name. But because I had done the Dying Day stuff, and I had my name was out there because of the zombie stuff, to do a contemporary fiction series based in a city that Flagler Beach is a real place. All those places are real places with just made up characters, and I didn't want to be the asshole who sat at Kokomo's Cafe at a book signing and said, "Oh, here's my book under my pen name, Bob Smith." I thought that would be kind of stupid, and I threw it out there, and actually it did. They all did quite well, and there's a big audience that will read pretty much anything that I put out, which is great. Most readers aren't I just read horror books, or I just read Bizarro, or I just read beach reads, or whatever. They'll dabble in other stuff, and a lot of times they go for an author. They like that author. I mean, look at Stephen King. I'm not a big Stephen King fan, but he hasn't just written horror books, I mean, he's written a ton of, lots of different things and mixing in and out, different genres within a story and stuff. So it's, some of the stuff you can go, okay, I love it, and then I love Shawshank Redemption, or, the story that came from. Those are two really different stories, but it's by the same author. And I just thought, I'm going to give this a shot, and I'm going to do it all under my name. And the only thing I've ever used a pen name was for the erotica stuff. That's just too out there.
Well, it's an interesting thing that you took it. One of the things we've become good friends over the years outside of just the writing thing.
Whoa. Good friends? Let's not push it, Frank.
Okay, friends. All right, we're just acquaintances. Anyway. One of the things I find as I've learned from you over the years is your marketing techniques. You've been studying book marketing pretty much ever since you put out your first ebook. You've been very like a scholar you've been reading blogs, you've been reading all the newsletters and finding all these different techniques. And what I always like about you is you always have something new and different things like I would never think of. And I often find in like Bizarro is that I guess the nature of the beast is we kind of just preach to our own choir. We don't really it's hard to get in to bring an audience in. You just sort of the audience finds Bizarro. Like you don't go out and get people to come into this. It's hard to market it outside of itself. And what I like about, just following you, but also horror in general, there's different marketing that goes on from Bizarro to horror, and I'm sure across like romance and other genres. And like for Shocker, we just did a Facebook release party. And, I never see that in Bizarro, but when we did that, it had a really great impact, I felt, about reaching an audience.
Yeah.
About talking to the people who, bought pre-orders and getting them on board to continue through the trilogy and just to present ourselves. Like a lot of people, like everybody knows you, and I was like the underdog there. Nobody really knew me. I felt like I was able to earn a lot of respect amongst your readers, to play on your field, so to speak. And I thought that was an excellent marketing technique. Certainly not something you would only want to do, but I see that, and it was pretty effective. I've also seen it not go so well, but I think if you play a release party, an online release party, right, it can be beneficial. Do you find they work well?
I find they work well, and I'm going to tell you what, I guess not my secret, but what I really like about them, because I've, again, like you said, I study. I've gone to a million of these release parties and some. And really what we were doing was we were selling us. We were selling our personalities. And you and I have that same, stupid asshole personality, which really works. So we were able to really joke and say some stupid things and have some goofy contests and stuff. But really, it was the interaction. It was that Ask Me Anything thread, and we really just got to talk to a lot of different people. And it wasn't buy our book, buy our book, buy our book. I think that is also important. A lot of people are always like, they left. They're like, wow, in that one, we talked about Still Dying 2, which the two of us both had a short story in. It's set in my dying days world. So I gave probably 40 or 50 copies of it away that night for free because I want people to read it. And hopefully they'll like both of us. I talked about Hollywood Hellmouth. We talked about other people and other books. I'm not afraid to give props to other people. And I think that's, that's the fun of it too, is just to let people know, who we really are and the goofing around and the personality. And honestly, if we had walked away from that and hadn't sold a book that night, but got a few new fans and everything, and maybe somewhere down the line they'll buy that book or any other book, that's a success to me. That's, I'm always trying to look at it long term. I think is the important thing, is not to do Facebook ads and Fiverr ads and Twitter ads and all this other Twitter parties and Facebook parties and all this other crap and go, okay, well, we did it, so let me look at my numbers tomorrow and I only sold 3 books and I didn't make my $10 back, so I'm never going to do that again. I don't ever look at it like that. I always look at long term, what are these, what do these little bumps do for me? And, like Dying Days, I give out Darlene for free and people say you're nuts. And I say, but every time I sell that gives me about $8 or $9 in my pocket because they're buying all the other books. And sometimes it's more because they're buying a dozen different books from me. So I look at it a little differently, and I just think my social media presence is can always be bigger and bigger. I'm trying to reach more and more potential readers and fans.
And it's funny too. You say that buy my book technique doesn't work. Now I feel like, obviously I feel like that's true, but I feel like that's true on Facebook because it feels like what I'm supposed to be doing on Twitter is buy my book, buy my book. I'm constantly retweeting pitches for the book. And I guess why that's a better platform is just because the tweets, the scrolls by, you're reaching different people at different times with the same tweet, and people don't necessarily see you constantly saying buy my book for the most part. Well,
to me, Facebook is where you go to sit and bullshit and forget about all that for a while, and post stupid posts and see family pictures and cats or whatever. You're not on Facebook necessarily for that. Twitter, to me, is the part of it is, as an author, it's the marketplace. It's sharing everybody else's tweet. I'm in 5 different retweet groups. And it really helps me. And to have 112,000 Twitter followers definitely helps me. So when I put out a tweet about Shocker, that's getting out there and that's floating around, and everybody who's retweeting it just keeps reaching people that I have no idea who they are, and they might like it and they might become friends with me and they might look at other books. And again, I look at that long term. And for me, Twitter is that long term. 40 or 50 people share one of my tweets, and it helps. I think it definitely helped me when I basically ignored most of the Facebook stuff and did all of Dirty Deeds. All of the campaigning was done on Twitter, and it was Thunderclap and a Head Talker, and it was just retweeting and it was resharing it whenever somebody mentioned the book, and that really, really helped me, to run the perfect campaign to get a contract from them.
Yeah, it's I'm still struggling with Twitter, figuring it all out. I on my first interview on the first show of Bizzong, I had Danger Slater in here, and he was talking about how he was just getting into learning how to get Twitter, and he pumped up, 1,000 people following him in a month and everything. And so, I've been trying to pay a little more attention to it, but that's a rough one to learn how to market.
The problem is it changes all the time. That's why, like you said, I read every blog, I do all this stuff. I'll try everything, but I'm also very honest on the stuff that I suck at and the stuff that doesn't work, and the money that I've thrown away over the years, or the bad moves I've made. But I've learned from those. And again, a year ago, Facebook was, you could post on 40 different groups, here's my book, and you'd get a couple hundred sales on that, and it worked. Now, not only does it not work, but now you're pissing everybody off, and then Facebook is going to block you anyway and throw you in Facebook jail for posting too many times.
Yeah.
So the rules change all the time. You know, the way Amazon sells. When I jumped into this 5-6 years ago full time, it was like I called it the Wild West. 2009, I threw up that first book, and there weren't a ton of books out there, and I was making a crap load of money, and I thought, I'm going to be a millionaire, by the time I'm 50 here, because it was one of those things where you could do basically anything, you could release anything you wanted, and people were going to buy it because there just wasn't a ton of ebooks out at that point. Now there's arguably there's too many. So it changes, and you have to keep changing with the times. We might do this in a year and say, hey, remember when we were on Twitter?
Right. Following the indie markets for the past 3, 4, 5 years, you see everybody wants advice. Everybody wants to, find that golden egg of what makes it all work. And everybody definitely follows trends. If you sort of, on my other podcast, Book Smear and Bullshit, my co-host, he's not a writer by any stretch of it. He just wants to read. He just wants to be entertained by reading. That's his thing.
Right.
And often he brings up his frustrations with, the way books are. He's like, oh, why do I got to look at this shit? Why is everything, 20 pages now and in 50 parts and all that shit? And he's a reader. He's being frustrated by this, but also, being that I write and I understand what these trends, I'm like trying to explain to him, well, it's because of this Amazon fucking unlimited thing and everybody's trying to make money grabs. And he's like, I really don't give a fuck. I just want to read a book that's like more than 50 pages and not drop $2.99 on a book that's, 25 pages. It's retarded, ridiculous. So,
But has your mindset changed since you started becoming a writer too, though? Because now you used to be just on that side of the fence.
Yeah.
But now you're on this side. So, now you understand it. But I imagine, because I know...
I understand
back
it.
When I was the same as Jeff. I was, this is bullshit, with these shorter books.
Like one of his complaints is like all of a sudden I'm getting all these recommendations for like classical books. And as 20,000 Leagues on... Everything's out of copyright. What he didn't understand was that everybody is republishing, because it's copyright free now. Everybody's republishing their own version, trying to make free money. And like I had to explain it to him, and he's just like, I don't give a fuck. I don't want to see this. Is all bullshit. So I think for me, I always favor inside of the reader. I always look at it from a reader's perspective, right, about getting money. Like I am still incensed when I look at a book. It looks like, okay, it's a book. I dropped $3 on an ebook, and it's fucking 15 pages. And now I'm pissed. And now you're getting, and maybe I like the 15-page story, but now I'm pissed that I dropped $3 on something you wrote in 5 minutes. I don't think you earned $3 for that. And this is especially, I come down especially hard on this, erotica shit that's coming out, and especially the quote-unquote Bigfoot erotica dinosaur, that nonsense.
Tentacle erotica.
They're infamous for 10-page nonsense and charging you like $3.99, like really outrageous. Yeah. And it's not so much what it is, it's the cost of what it is. It's I think preposterous.
Well, what's really funny though is, when you put a book in on Amazon, one of the things you can do is basically they'll basically suggest a price for it. So like when I put in Shocker, and it's like 25,000 words or whatever, and so the suggestion is $2.99, which is that sweet spot, which is fine. When I was putting in, and I haven't written the erotica stuff in a long time, but when I was putting in a 5,000 word erotica story, the suggested price on that was $4.99. Because that's what they're going to get. When I put up the original Metal Queens books, I was putting up for 99 cents, and then I went up to $2.99. But when I redid a couple of them or did a better formatting of a couple of books and put them up, their suggested prices were $5.99 for those books.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Like I get it now as a writer. I understand it from the marketing point, from royalty sense. Like I'd explain that to Jeff about, you get a lot more money on a book for $2.99 as opposed to if you sold it for 99 cents.
Right.
And there's that aspect to it.
But the reader doesn't give a shit about that.
The
average reader doesn't care. They're looking at, why am I paying $2.99 for this?
Right. Yeah. They're just like, what am I getting for my $3?
Now let me ask.
Often with ebooks, you don't realize what you're getting for your $2.99 until after you drop the money on it.
Well, like I do the Kindle Unlimited for $9.99 a month because I read a lot of books and I read mostly nonfiction stuff. And nonfiction books are $5.99, $6.99. A lot of that stuff is just, wrestling biographies or music ones. And some of those are in Kindle Unlimited. I read them, but every now and then I get one, and it's like you said, it's 10 pages, and they were charging $5.99 for this. And if I had bought this for $5.99, I would have been pissed. But the fact that I can read it in half an hour, and it's just part of my $9.99, then I'm not as mad, and I just go past it. But there's too many of those books. You have to go through, and sometimes the page counts are off.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to what you said before. I think currently there's like just an oversaturation in the market.
Well, there was a big shift a couple of years ago, especially a year ago when we started with the Kindle Unlimited stuff and the page reads and the original way they did it, because they tweaked it a couple of times. And people were going, wait a minute, I can just take my 50,000 word novel and serialize it into 10 5,000 word parts and charge 99 cents for each and make more money that way. I can make $10 that way, or I can make $2.99 this way. And they were dumping them in there. And then we had 5 million box sets for 99 cents, and everybody was collecting pennies on that. And it just goes through the changes, and you roll with it. But then it's what the readers start getting pissed at that, and then they stop. They're not reading those short stories. The problem is those are still up there. You still have to wade through that garbage because it's been up there for 3 and 4 years.
So I think the ultimate lesson to learn here is that there is no rule that works for everybody. What might work for one guy.
There's no rule that's going to work forever. I used to have about 150 releases on Amazon. I'm down to about 120, and I've put out probably about another 10 or 15 things. I've deleted about 40 different things over the last few months because they were short stories. They were, serialized Keepware Cthulhu, was 5 different parts, and then the complete book. And I got rid of the shorter ones. At the time I put them up, I made a ton of money on those because that's how people were reading them. And then it got to the point where they stopped reading those serialized versions, so I took them all down. Now, a couple years from now, 5 years from now, that might be the new thing again, and then I'll change it to do that. I mean, I'm in this to write a great story, but I'm also in to see the marketing and what's going to make me some money too.
Yeah, it's a game, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Just you got
now. Let me ask you.
Yeah.
Bizarro stuff. What's the pricing on that?
It's typically the same. You see $2.99, $2.99, $4.99, depending on.
So there's no like crazy. Okay, we have this rabid audience, and we're going to charge you $4.99 for a 5,000 word short story or anything like that.
No, I definitely do not see that as much.
Right. Well, that's good.
Yeah. Like I said, Bizarro sort of preaches to his own choir. There's, my experience has been there's, more writers that are buying the other writer's stuff, and there's less, just pure Bizarro readers that aren't necessarily writers.
Yeah.
It's sort of that type of community.
Right.
So I think everybody's sort of respectful on pricing, and in Bizarro, I've noticed a lot more willingness to just pass around the books. Even paperbacks, everybody trades around and everything. It's very much like a community, and
right.
The marketing type of thing. Like I said, it could be just inherent in what Bizarro is. The marketing thing doesn't come into play nearly as much as I see with other genres.
Well, but to me, on the outside, Bizzarro is like the do-it-yourself punk of all of this, of publishing.
It very
so
much does.
They're kind of on the outskirts of just, what, fuck you, we're doing our own thing, and they don't want to be big. They don't want that $1 million seller out there, in theory.
Right. It's
because then every asshole is gonna start going, oh, I've loved Carlton Mellick for 10 years, that kind of garbage.
Yeah, that discussion has been had often on this podcast of will it break out? Can it break out? Will it screw it up if it does break out? Do we want it to break out? It's a balancing act, I think. But what I have seen work very well with Bizzarro is like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. You'll announce a project and get everybody excited about it and get funded. I've seen projects get funded 2 and 3 times over. Just recently, John Skip has sort of relaunched his imprint from Eraserhead, and they made tons of money just re-releasing these books. But they're putting out super high quality product that everybody is aware of. What Skip is capable of, and all the writers he's releasing books for. So, when it's a really great idea and you got the talent there, the Bizzarro people do throw money at it.
I think the good part with Bizzarro, too, is, again, and I'm saying this from the outside, so I may be wrong, there's not 5 million assholes who are just coming in going, oh, I'm going to just start putting out books. And you get that in small press. You get every, Bob, Dick, and Jerry and Jane can put out a book and go, I'm a publisher, and I'm going to start putting out anthologies and books like crazy, and they're not, there's no backing up for it, and they have no idea what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
Bizzarro, there's not a ton of those publishers, and the ones that are out there seem like they're doing a great job of putting out the quality books for that small but rabid fan base that's pretty much going to buy. If you're a Bizzarro fan, you're pretty much excited because all these books are coming out, and you probably like 90% of them.
Yeah, it's very true. It's not completely immune from that sort of fly-by-night publishing and authors just fly-by-night authors. Anybody that really does try to start a press, presses that have come and gone, but I think more so than any other genre, that anybody who does start up a press or tries to throw their hat into the writing ring is a lot more dedicated or sincere about what they're trying to do. It may not work out for them, but they're not just trying to throw shit at a wall and see if it sticks in Bizzarro. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's like I said, it's sort of a different thing, and it could be why the marketing is different in Bizzarro.
Yeah.
Now, we're getting close to the end here, but I want to bring up another thing that you do that I think is very important, and that's Authors Supporting Our Troops. It's a program that you run where you collect brand new, author-signed, preferably author-signed books that you in turn send out to troops in remote parts of the world who don't readily have access to, books or TV, entertainment, even the internet. And you've been on your third year now of doing this, and you've had some very good success doing that. And can you just touch on what that program is a little more?
Well, I mean, you summed it up quite nicely, I might add. But it started a couple of years ago, and it started because Joe McKinney, who's a friend of mine and a great author, had asked me and a few other authors. They said, hey, I got this soldier I know in a remote area, and I'm going to send him or her and unit some books. And he ended up collecting about 500 or so books. And I signed a handful of them, and I sent them to him. And I thought it was just an awesome thing. And then the next year came around, and my wife's godson, James, who you met, Frank and his wife were at my wedding. He came in. He's in the Army, and he had just gone to Kuwait. And my wife said, I'm going to send him a couple of your books, if you don't mind. I said, yeah, sure. And I said, hey, maybe I'll send him a bunch, and he can give them away. And I said, no, let me ask Joe. Maybe Joe's still doing this program. And Joe said, no, luckily that soldier had come home. And I said, would you mind if I kind of did this and just, put a feeler out to see if anybody would be interested in, doing this, if anybody knew any soldiers or anything. And I didn't want to do a nonprofit. I didn't want to go through the USO. I wanted to just do it all myself, figuring I'd get 2 or 3 people. And ended up getting over 30 soldiers that first year because there was so many. Everybody knows a soldier somewhere, you know, and I got it really from family and friends and people who knew these soldiers. And I collected 3,000 books that first year, and I was blown away by the amount of authors that were willing to not only give me signed books and send me books, but then tons of donations. We did a bunch of different authors supporting our troops T-shirts, and all the profit from those goes towards the shipping. And it was just it was awesome. So last year we collected 3,500 books, and this year I hope to collect more. And it's just really neat when I get an email back, or an author gets an email from a soldier and says, "Hey, I just read your book, and I'm a fan now." And a lot of soldiers out there who maybe weren't big readers in high school or whatever. And when you have nothing else to do, you know, they grab a book and they pass the books around and read them. And I just think it's a cool thing to do. You know, it's good karma is the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's great karma. I've been behind this, you know, program of yours from the get-go. I've always tried to give you some money. You do T-shirts to help raise funds for, you know, the cost of shipping. I have 2014 on T-shirts from authors supporting our troops. Just ordered my 2016 one. And last year I actually donated some books to you for the program. That felt awesome. And I just love it. And, you know, occasionally, I know you get pictures back. You're not always allowed to share them. Sometimes you can, and it's completely inspiring when you see pictures of these soldiers overseas, and you can tell they're in these remote bases, and they're just happy as hell to have these books in their hand and just this, you know, mountain of books that they can pick from. And it always tickles me. What you do is when you get books, you take a picture of everybody's donations and put it up on the Facebook page for the program. And I'm always tickled by, like, you get so many, like, romance books and these crazy nice books. You wouldn't think that authors would, you know, like a romance author go, "Oh, let me send my book about, you know, the happy fuzzy people." And
well, a lot of authors, though, especially the romance authors and stuff like that, will ask me, and they'll say, "Hey, I wrote this historical romance series, and I want to send it to you. I want to help, but I don't think it's a right fit and everything." And right from the beginning, one of the first soldiers I ever sent a book to, or sent a box of books to, the contact between, basically they said that that would be great because his unit, and there was like 20 people in the unit, had been passing around a copy of 50 Shades of Grey. It was the only thing they had to read, and they each read it like 2 or 3 times because there was nothing else to do. So they're pretty much starved. They'll read anything was basically what they were telling me. And it's amazing that it's not even really sometimes about the books. Like I'll take, you know, like you said, I take pictures of every book that comes in and post it in the permanent Facebook group. And it's funny, some of the books that will come in, there'll be like these, you know, like historical romance and other stuff. But I also tell people, you know what? There's also female soldiers who love to read all of this stuff too. So I get a lot of pictures that I'm not allowed to share from soldiers because of security risks, especially over the last couple of years. And where in the first year I used to share a lot of them. I used to post a lot of them up, and then they basically told them to stop doing that because you're putting faces and locations in some parts, so they're not allowed really to post on Facebook anymore. But I had a really cool picture not too long ago with a soldier and in the desert, and, you know, they're in Afghanistan, and the sun's coming down over the mountains behind them, and there's one guy who's standing, you know, with his rifle looking out, and then there's another guy sitting behind him sitting on a bucket, and he's got like a stack of books next to him, and he's got a book open, and his rifle slung over his shoulder, and he's just sitting there reading. And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool that, you know, they're just sitting out there, and one of them's standing guard and the other one is reading his book.
Yeah, that's the best part. And, you know, it's very much not a political thing. It's just giving people, you know, they're just doing their part, their job. And
I send to all branches of the military. It doesn't matter at all. You know, every now and then I get somebody who goes, well, I'm ex-Marine or Navy or whatever, and can you send them, you know, I want my book to go to them, and I say no. Your books are getting split up in 10 or 15 boxes, depending on how many you send, and everybody's randomly getting, you know, these books, and that's the fun of it. I try not to fill up a box with here's romance or here's horror or whatever. No, I mix them all up as evenly as possible, and I think that's a soldier's going to open that box, and there's going to be about 50 books in the box, and I send 2 boxes. So you might have 15 or 20 people, and you're going to open up 100 books. Everybody's going to get 4 or 5 books. So it's up to you what you're looking for and what you're pulling from those boxes. I see a lot of pictures of these dudes are like 6'6" and 300 pounds, you know, with a machine gun over their back, and they have a romance novel in their hand and they're reading it. So it really doesn't matter. They just want to read something.
You know, I want to throw down a challenge now to the bizarro and weird fiction community out there, right? Now we've been talking a lot about marketing tonight. Look, this is a captive audience, as it were. So here's my challenge. Like I said, Armand takes pictures of all the books he gets, his donations. I don't see very many bizarro books. No. So what I'd love to see an uptick in the bizarro books getting sent into this program. Listen to me from a marketing point of view. If you send 1 book, you send 3, you send 10. It doesn't matter. Armand will take any. He's happy to have any amount of books.
Yeah.
And just sign the inside cover, a little nice personal note. They're going to get shipped out to a rabid audience. They're dying for something to read. They're going to come home eventually, God willing, and maybe they're going to love your book and come home and like, I gotta read more of this guy's stuff. So
yeah, and after 3 years now of doing this, we're getting a lot of that. We're getting people who are ending tours, and they're saying, "Hey, I read your," you know, they're getting in touch with authors and saying, "Hey, I read your book when I was in Kuwait, and what else do you have? Or I want to buy your stuff now, or just to thank you, or whatever." And like you said, the marketing is, you know what? We have the permanent Facebook group. If you just, you know, do a Facebook search for authors supporting our troops, it pops up. It's an open group. You can join. There's rules. You can't post shit about your books. But if you send me books, I post pictures of those books up there. And a lot of times people will contact and go, "Hey, that looks like a cool book," because there's also readers in the group. There's a ton of readers in that group because they buy the shirts and they give me donations and share the post and everything else. So a lot of times those people are in there going, "Hey, that's a cool book," and they end up buying your book anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I've done that myself. I've seen the cover, and I'm like, oh, that sounds cool, and looked up the book, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I've done that more than once, so
yeah.
That's
well, I've gotten these books in, and my wife will yell and go, "Put them in the box," because I start reading them. I start looking at the covers, and I start reading this looks in. I've never heard of this or that, and she's like, "Put them in the box, before you steal the book and start reading through them." And I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really want to see an uptick in the bizarro donations coming in. So can you just let everybody know the best ways to get in contact with you to find out how to send you this stuff?
Yeah, like I said, I don't ever post my address online, but if you send me an email at armandrosamilia@gmail.com and just put in there author supporting our troops in the subject, on Twitter I use hashtag ASOT2016, and then go on Facebook. The group is there. It's a permanent group. And there's over 1,000 people in it. And also, then if you're in the group, then I can tag you when books are coming in that they've arrived and stuff like that. And also, what I'm doing this year is if you're sending me books, I will also send you back a author supporting our troops a bumper sticker. I had bumper stickers made with my own money, and bookmarks. We just got bookmarks done again. Out of my pocket, which is great because I appreciate everybody doing this stuff. So it's a little ways for me to give back. Same with the shirts. I do the shirts so they're very cheap, usually like $13 or somewhere around there, and so that little bit of money that comes in on that goes towards the shipping cost, which is thousands of dollars a year to ship all this stuff, to get the boxes and to do all this work for it. I don't take a salary out of this. It's not a non-profit, none of that. I just do it because I love doing it. It's karma back, and I love getting those emails and stuff back from a soldier somewhere that says, hey, I just read. Doesn't he, for me, it's not even, hey, they read my book. It's that they read somebody's book. Hey, I just read Frank Edler's Scared Silly book, and don't send me this shit ever again. No,
I totally dig that. Like I said, I would love to see the bizarre uptick. So I hope we get a bunch of guys contacting you. Just send
that
one
would be
book.
Awesome.
Yeah, send one book. Send 10 books. It's all awesome. Unfortunately, we've come to the point in the show I always hate. I got to end it. I like to keep it short. We don't want to bore anybody.
Yeah.
So, every show I've done for Bizzong, I've had to cut it off, and I hate to do it. Nobody's bored me so far. I wish we could interview forever, but I'm not the guy that puts out a 3-hour podcast. So,
no.
Okay,
don't ever be that guy.
No, and I won't. But it also gives us an opportunity to bring you back at another time so we could talk more.
Yeah, I would be on anytime. Congratulations on the podcast on Project iRadio.
Thank you.
It's a very cool thing. I've listened to the first couple podcasts, and I laugh. And my wife always says, "What do you listen to?" Whenever I say Frank's podcast, she always goes, she thinks that's hysterical that I'm listening to your podcast, but she wants no part of it.
This one is not nearly as bad as Books, Beer, and Bullshit. Let's be honest.
No, yeah. You know what? Yeah, it's not nearly as bad. It's good though.
Yes, thank you.
You're doing a good job so far, so keep it up.
Thank you. I would be remiss in letting you go without mentioning you also are on Project iRadio 2 times over with your podcast, Armcast, the Dead Sexy Horror Podcast, which, my God, you got Brian Keene talking about you. I see you up for a lot of Podcast of the Year type awards. All I'm going
to say is on this week's, so I told you we went to Atlanta last week, so Friday on the way back home, or Thursday or Wednesday on the way up, we listened to last week's Brian Keene podcast, The Horror Show with Brian Keene, also here on Project iRadio. And my wife always listens. She likes listening, because she likes to learn. She wants to learn more about the business and all that. And Brian's got a good podcast for that. So on the way up, we listened, and on the way back Friday was this week's podcast, where Brian mentions me twice by name in the podcast. And I'm still like a little kid. I was like, holy crap, he mentioned me again,
Yeah, totally. I listen to the Horror Show all the time. And, even though I'm now like a coworker with Brian, so to speak, as being on Project iRadio with him, it's just, it doesn't ever get old when a superstar like Brian Keene brings up your name. It's got to feel like a million.
No, not at all. And then you'll be with, you'll get to hang out with us again in July for Scares That Care. You'll be there, right?
Oh, definitely. Rooms booked. We're going to get down to Scares That Care in Williamsburg. I can't wait to be a part of that convention. Another great, charitable, awesome time, it sounds like.
Yeah, and Brian will be there, and I'll be doing my other podcast, Armand 2's Dead Time podcast with Mark Tufo. We'll be recording in kilts. Should be interesting. Brian Keene will also be up there, and Joe Ripple from Scares That Care will also be wearing kilts.
It's going to be an awesome time. And I hope, I hope that everybody on Bizzong does listen to all these other podcasts that happen on Project iRadio, because I think everybody has the same sort of interest. So all these podcasts that we talk about, Armcast, Armand 2, Horror Time with Brian Keene. I just got into the Necrocasticon. That's a freaking awesome one.
Yeah, another great one, yeah.
What's Kelly Owens, the Daisy Doom.
Buttercup of Doom.
Buttercup of Doom, my God, another one. I love listening to her. So many great podcasts here. It's an honor for me to be podcasting on this network with all of you. We got to stop musing. I got to let you go. We got to cut this podcast off so nobody gets bored.
All right, man.
So thank you very much for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
I'll talk to you later, Frank.
So there he is, Zongers, Mr. Armand Rosamilia. Not exactly your traditional bizarro kind of guy, but he has delved into the weird fiction. He's done his part. He's added those strange words to the world So I hope you enjoyed a bit of an unconventional sort of interview for this show. Next week, another great episode. We got publishers next week. We're going to talk to some Bizarro publishers. I can't wait to put that out. That's two guys talking about their new publishing venture, so to speak. In the meantime, I'm going to implore you this episode to, after you're done listening to Bizzong, to go out and check out the other podcasts here on Project I Radio. You all know about the horror show with Brian Keene. If you aren't listening to that, there's probably something wrong with your ears. So that needs no push. There's other great podcasts besides Brian Keene and Bizzong. You've got, like we were just talking about, the Armcast podcast, another great writing podcast for writers to listen to. He has a lot of, he brings in writers from all walks of life and talks to all kinds of people in and around the industry. So it's a very useful podcast to listen to week in and week out. I just got into, very recently on Project iRadio, Kelly Owens' Buttercup of Doom. My God, I just love listening to her weaponized tongue just destroy all the silliness in this world. There's nothing like listening to that. And just recently, I discovered the Necrocasticon. Bunch of guys talking what I love, man. They're talking about books, and they're talking about horror, and they're talking about heavy metal. Three awesome things all rolled into one great podcast, the Necrocasticon. Check that out as well. Don't forget, Zongers, give us $1. That's all we ask for, $1 a month for a year, $12. Just $1 a bite at a time on our Patreon account, patreon.com/Project iRadio. It's just a small favor to ask for all these great podcasts I was just talking about. Really, it's not a lot of money, $1 for, my God, just those 4 or 5 podcasts right there. It's so worth it. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I don't get paid to do this on Project iRadio. This is a labor of love. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to contribute my $1 per week to keep up not only Bizzong, but all these other great podcasts. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm putting my $12 in, $1 at a time. It doesn't hurt. You can't even get coffee for $1 anymore. Not even at your local little crappy store. They're not selling you a little cup of coffee. $1? It's insane. $1 for great podcasting. Keep your mind off of life an hour at a time during the week after week. Makes a lot of sense. So much value in that little $1. So give us $1. Zongers, give us $1. Until next week, enjoy life.